You can't really describe someone without secondary sex characteristics and gender them into something.
Well, I mean, you can based on primary sex characteristics if you can see their genitals. Doctors do this literally at birth. I don't need a 7-year degree in sociology to know bullshit when I hear it.
From fiery college debates to explosive TV showdowns, Ben Shapiro has become a relentless voice making headlines and challenging the woke agenda. Known for his razor-sharp arguments and no-holds-barred approach, Shapiro doesn't hesitate to dive headfirst into today's most contentious topics. Whether he's dissecting progressive policies or taking on cultural hot buttons, Shapiro's bold and uncompromising stance has sparked both intense support and fierce backlash. In this video, we'll explore how Ben Shapiro continues to shake up the conversation, challenging the narratives that dominate today's culture. Watch as Ben Shapiro goes head-to-head with a college student pushing the puberty blocker narrative.
You have claimed that you oppose medical transitioning for these children, namely and specifically to what normally happens is puberty blockers, which you have called, you called it child abuse. Is that correct?
It is. That's correct.
You consider it, okay, you consider it child abuse. You consider it child abuse because you believe that a child is not capable of consenting to what you consider are irreversible procedures. Is that correct?
A damaging, irreversible procedure.
Damaging, okay. Ben, are your children circumcised? Did you circumcise your children?
Yes, I have 2 sons and they're both circumcised.
Why would you do that? Isn't that kind of hypocritical?
Nope, I'm circumcised, my works just fine.
With his trademark rapid-fire logic, Ben dismantles their points like a game of Jenga, pulling out the blocks one by one until the whole structure starts to wobble. Questioning the ethics and long-term impact of these treatments on minors, he doesn't mince words, keeping the student on their toes while tossing in some eyebrow-raising facts.
Why is violating the bodily autonomy of an infant acceptable to you? And I can say, I'm a owner and I can tell you, there's sensitivity right there, Ben, that is removed when you do a circumcision. Why is that okay to you?
Well, I don't mean to get personal, but I'm sure it doesn't seem like you could possibly have a basis for comparison. You can't be both circumcised and uncircumcised. You're going to have to choose. As far as the efficacy of a once it's circumcised, if you wish to get into the biology, I'm perfectly happy to just point at my 4 children. I've been fruitful and I've multiplied. It's all working out just great. As for the notion that it is a grave violation of bodily autonomy, I can tell you there are millions of men across time who've been circumcised. This is not a quote-unquote damaging procedure in the same way that, taking a boy and shooting him full of estrogen so you can later cut off his and is. That's an absurd comparison on every level.
Like, for example, gender identity disorder, that's the DSM-4, bro. We use the DSM-5 now for psychologists to be able to talk about...
I literally cited the DSM-5 in the speech, and it's called gender dysphoria, which is a term that I use throughout the speech, not gender identity disorder.
You sound like a bozo, bro. And you get no pussy, and you can't even make your wife wet, bro, so what's good?
This wokey thinks he's bringing the logic. Just wait until Ben Shapiro steps in and drops the reality check.
So, let me just say, the nice thing about having several small children is I don't feel the necessity to have my masculinity
challenged. If we're using a
by
Western colonial idea of gender, then why should it apply? If we're using, because the gender binary is a Western colonialist framework of gender.
You're right. Men and women don't exist in any other culture.
No. Think about Native American.
Nailed it.
Third gender people. I'm not saying that. Third gender people exist in Native American societies, Western African societies, like Southern Native American societies, like Mexico. So in other places that are not white dominated,
and
like the United States or Europe. And so you're saying white,
so
non-white people. I'm a mathematician and a physicist. You cannot tell me.
So I have a question.
And also, you're not a biologist.
So I have a question.
I'm 20.
As a mathematician and a physicist, what in the hell do you know about human biology?
And you got your law degree from Harvard. What do you know about biology? You got your law degree from Harvard.
And frankly, I would ask another question. If your logic is so flawed as a mathematician and a physicist, I would suggest that whichever institution gave you an award, revoke it immediately.
He started off giving himself a pat on the back, nearly managed a moment of credibility, but then spiraled into a mess of vulgar insults. Good thing Ben was there to set him straight.
As most of you know, I'm voting for Donald Trump in November. I've said so many times at this point, but I'm not just voting for Donald Trump. Next week, I will be...
You heard that right. Ben Shapiro is now backing Trump. While he didn't support Trump in the past, it seems the rise of woke culture has changed his tune. Fed up with the constant push for progressive ideals, Ben now sees Trump as the guy who could put a stop to what he views as out-of-control wokeness. According to Shapiro, Trump might be the one to rein it in and bring some balance back.
Mass deportations, it calls for that. Do you support that part?
If they have not paid taxes and if their draw on the taxpayer benefits are larger than the contribution they are making to the economy, or if they're involved in criminal activity, they should be deported.
How do we measure that?
The same way that the IRS measures my income every year. It seems like if the IRS can track down every aspect of every receipt that I've ever submitted, and
So
they can do so for hundreds
pay-
of millions of other Americans, they can do that for illegal immigrants as well, except for the fact that no one knows how many are in the country.
Our guy, Ben Shapiro. Love him or hate him, you've got to admit the man does not back down. Whether it's on gender identity, free speech, or anything in between, Shapiro isn't here to cater to feelings. He's here to drop facts. And let's be real, that makes things a whole lot more interesting. While at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, a confident student struts up to Shapiro, ready to argue that gender is a spectrum, disconnected from biological sex. I mean, what could go wrong? Well, a lot, apparently. Shapiro listens, nods, and then, bam! He hits back with his classic Shapiro logic.
There's a time where the word mother exclusively described a woman in relation to her biological offspring, but our definition has since shifted to account for adoption, leaving us with a more social and less biological outlook on motherhood. My question for you is how affirming transgender identity is such a threat to biology when we have clear precedent for similar shifts in language?
Okay, so usually there is a distinction. You can call somebody mother, but then an adoptive mother is not going to be insulted when you say biological mother. Right? An adopted mother is not going to say that biological mother is an inappropriate term. The trans movement claims that the term biological female is somehow offensive. The trans movement will claim that female encompasses not biology somehow. It's a bizarrely illogical categorization. So the trans movement is not a threat to biology. Biology is biology. People will continue to reproduce. I mean, some of us. But in any case, the no implication made. But in any case, some people will continue to reproduce. Those reproductive relationships will be almost entirely male-female.
It's like watching someone prepare for a long debate, only to get knocked out in the first round. Fast forward to a live TV showdown with transgender activist Zoe Tur on Dr. Drew on Call. Now here is where things get a little messy. Shapiro casually refers to Tur as Sir, and let's just say, Tur was not having it. She grabs him by the neck and warns him, "You'll go home in an ambulance if you don't stop."
Chromosomes don't necessarily mean you're male or female.
Gender.
With gender
identity. Go ahead. No, so
especially, but even so, you have a thing like Klinefelter's syndrome. So you don't know what you're talking about. You're not educated on genetics.
Would you actually to discuss the genetics? Or
no,
what are your genetics?
So I'd stay away from the genetics and back to the brain scans.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
No, I know. Well, but wait. To be fair, but to be fair, you're actually being kind of rude. And that's not fair.
I'm sorry, it's not rude to say that someone who is biologically a male is a male.
You just
someone who is biologically male.
But Shapiro doesn't flinch. He calmly doubles down on his belief. Biology doesn't change based on how you feel.
Yes. Why are we mainstreaming delusion?
It's not delusion.
Why would you call it delusion?
Because Bruce Caitlyn Jenner, I'll call him Caitlyn Jenner.
No,
because
it's
that's
her. You're not being polite to the pronouns.
Because
disrespectful.
Okay, forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings.
Which brings us to the question, how far is too far when standing up for what you believe in? And is it worth the risk of getting choked on live TV? Next up, Politicon 2017, where Ben Shapiro debates conservative transgender YouTuber Blair White. It's less physical, but just as intense. Shapiro's message is clear. Live however you want, but don't expect society to rewrite the rules of science.
I'm completely libertarian on what you do. I don't care if you get surgery or hormone treatments. Do what floats your boat. I'm like, whatever. I mean, I hope that whatever makes you happier and healthier is what makes you happier and healthier. I may have my own perspective on if it were my kid, what I would allow my kid to do, but that's not the same thing as me saying to you, who are an adult, you know, you ought to do what I want you to do. But there's this idea that if we can just batter people with the pronoun discussion and make them seem as though they're uncaring and unfeeling and evil and nasty, then we'll somehow win the day. And I object to that generally because, you know, unlike even Michael Knowles, I do not have a surfeit of feeling. I'm not particularly keen on feelings as a motivator in politics.
White pushes back, calling for a bit more compassion because, hey, people have feelings too. But Shapiro, he's not budging.
Like, even to a certain extent, his argument was more about, like, well, can't you just be nice? And it's like, okay, there's room to be nice. Okay, there's room for everyone to be nice, but there's also, like, that's not the best argument for this.
Yeah.
And I think that...
And by the way, there are ways for me to be nice within my own purview, meaning that, as I said before, if you and I were talking, I would just refer to you as Blair all the time. Right, in order to to avoid this controversy, because it would be more fun to have dinner with you where we were just discussing topics as opposed to fighting about pronouns.
Exactly.
So where's the line between personal freedom and scientific fact? Can the two ever find common ground? Moving on to another clip, Ben Shapiro breaks down basic biology for a college student in his trademark no-nonsense style. He tackles the topic of transgenderism and misgendering, laying out the facts without sugarcoating anything.
We cannot fully identify a gender of a person right when we see them, so therefore I believe that it is not within my own individual liberty to gender that person.
Here's my problem with that particular argument. The answer is that in 99.8%, 99.9% of cases, you absolutely can gender somebody based on looking at them. Like, really. If you're going to use intersex people as an example of not being able to do that, this does not obviate the biological duality of sex upon which all progeneration is based for all of human history and for all mammalian species. So intersex people do not invalidate the concept of sex as a generality. Intersex people are people who have a biological anomaly. And by the way, in most cases of intersex, those people still manifest as either a male or a female. So the idea that intersex exists does not invalidate the idea that there is a male and that there is a female, or that in nearly all cases, I can tell the difference between a male and a female. Again, I'm not saying, by the way, that if you can show me your chromosomal charts that you are actually not a male, when I say that you're a male, that I should stick with that biological objective standard. Like my perception of you, in other words, is subject to my correct enunciation of an objective standard. So the objective standard, here's the deal. For all of human history, there was an objective standard between male and female. It was, for nearly all of human history, out of partial ignorance and partially because this is usually true, it was out of simply looking at people's genitals and assessing them based on their outward appearance, right? Which is still true for nearly all human beings on planet Earth at all times. Okay.
Shapiro argues that while individuals are free to identify however they choose, biological sex is grounded in science and reality. His straightforward explanation leaves little room for ambiguity, sparking a lively discussion on the intersection of biology, identity, and societal norms. Love him or hate him, Ben's not here to mince words.
You can't really describe someone without secondary sex characteristics and gender them into something.
Well, I mean, you can based on primary sex characteristics if you can see their genitals. Doctors do this literally at birth all the time, right? So this is but your point is correct. If somebody was male dressed as a female and I misgendered them, and then they said, "Oh, look, I'm male," zip, right? Then I would say correct, and then correct. I would say, for all of human history, you were male. Now the standard is chromosomal, right? It's the SRNY gene and all of this. There is some objective standard, in other words, by which we can determine sex. The problem I have with the transgender argument is that people are arguing that there is no objective standard, that no objective standard exists by which I can determine sex. And in fact, sex is completely subjective. I can determine my own gender based on no biology and, in fact, in abeyance of biology. I can have every single biological characteristic of a male, and if I say I am female, then I am female. This is anti-scientific nonsense.
Ben Shapiro and a leftist guest clash over transgenderism in a heated exchange. Shapiro, armed with his signature facts and logic, argues that gender is rooted in biology, while his opponent pushes for a more fluid, identity-based approach.
Why do you believe you're right about trans people given the American Psychological Association, American Medical Association, American Psychoanalytic Association? I can go on for about 5 more associations that are very prominent and govern the existing health government or health industries within the major Western countries. And all of these associations have multiple thousands of doctors, sociologists, psychologists, and with PhDs in their respective fields backing the idea that sex and gender are different, effectively gaining the medical consensus for sex and gender being 2 different concepts, yet you have a different opinion.
Okay, so sex and gender are 2 different concepts, but gender is tied to biology.
So one of the big problems that you see in sort of the argument in favor of trans rights is this notion that gender and sex are completely separable. They're not completely separable. If they are completely separable, then this means that identifying people by their subjective gender really has no relevance as to whether they are a male or a female. Male and female are biological terms. So using terminology like male and female to describe a self-perception of maleness or femaleness is sort of a bizarre way of arguing whether...
The tension rises as they debate the boundaries of identity, science, and societal acceptance. Shapiro doesn't back down, insisting that reality must take precedence over feelings, while the leftist calls for more understanding and inclusion. It's a fiery back and forth, and as always, Ben's not here to play nice.
None of the medical associations that I just named off would actually support the idea that gender is biological. This is something that's completely untrue within every single medical consensus.
Well, then I will just say that anyone who suggests that gender has no reference whatsoever to biology, it's not connected in any way to biology, is just full of shit. Because if the and the reason I and the reason that I say
then you actually just disagree with medical consensus within the Western nation.
Yes, I disagree with the false medical consensus driven by politically driven quote-unquote doctors. If any doctor denies to me that there is a dichotomy between male and female, a sexual dichotomy between male and female, they are ignorant and they are letting their politics get in the way of their science. Anybody who suggests to you that there is such a thing, for example, as a pregnant male is not a doctor, they are an activist.
This Wokey wasn't going down without a final mic drop. After a heated exchange, they fired back with one last jab, confident it would leave Ben Shapiro speechless. But of course, Shapiro wasn't having it. With his usual sharp rebuttal, he countered every point, proving once again that when it comes to a battle of logic versus emotion, Ben's got the upper hand. Next week.
I'm very glad that none of these opinions are actually accepted in academia and haven't been for over 70 years. Sent this here on Twitter.
Okay, so the notion that they haven't been accepted for over 70 years is a bizarre one, considering they were accepted until about 5 minutes ago. And the basic idea that male and female do not exist runs counter to all mammalian biology, all of it, not just human. Are we to suggest that gender and sex are different in walruses? How does this work exactly? Are they different in bears? Anytime you have all mammalian reproduction is rooted in the idea that there's a sexual dichotomy between male and female. To obscure that with all sorts of semantic word games about how you feel subjectively has no bearing on whether male and female are categories that exist. And if you're trying to define male and female with reference to any subjective category that cannot be identified by any metric whatsoever other than how you feel today, I challenge whether that is scientific or whether that is merely a self-perception that is being guided by a political...
Next, we move to another unforgettable moment. A woke student tries to debate Ben Shapiro, but ends up running away mid-argument. As the student gets increasingly flustered by Shapiro's rapid-fire facts and unyielding logic, they realize they're outmatched. And rather than stick around for the crushing rebuttals, they bolt.
Hey, I really wanted to thank you for coming out today, and specifically for talking to those who have different viewpoints than your own. I'm not looking to argue with you, I just want to know about the ideology as to why you think that a woman shouldn't have the right to her own bodily autonomy in regards to abortion.
A woman should have the right to her own bodily autonomy, but not to kill another human. You know, but as far as the idea that I'm sitting awake at night thinking, how do I control women's bodies? No, not really, not at all, actually. The thing that I do care about is the preservation of human life. I don't have an argument that pro-choicers are ignoring a premise. That's fine. You're allowed to ignore a premise or think a premise that I'm giving is wrong. Well, it turns out that the vast majority of women for literally all of human existence have engaged in childbearing and rearing, and it has not, in fact, ruined their lives. In fact, married women with children are, by poll data, the happiest women in America.
All right, thank you for the straw man fallacy. Thank you.
I missed what she actually said. What was it? Straw man?
Straw man fallacy, I think.
You can't just shout straw man and run away. Do you want to come back and explain why it was a straw man, or no? Okay, you're just going to run away.
It's the perfect example of what happens when emotions clash with reason. Some can't handle the heat and just make a run for it. Ben Shapiro destroys a woke lady in a gender debate over the Boy Scouts. She pushes for transgender girls in the boys program, but Ben swiftly shuts her down with cold, hard facts. Her argument obliterated. Ben, unfazed. Classic Shapiro.
Okay.
Biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So, the idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. And I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be. If you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, No, I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
Okay, but you're still saying these kids should like not be accepted because they don't really fit in either place?
I'm saying that the Boy Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout. You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Where's that written though?
In the name Boy Scouts.
Ben Shapiro's actions against woke culture are absolutely insane. Whether it's schooling college students, dismantling arguments with facts, or taking on the left's most controversial stances, Ben doesn't back down. He's always ready to confront the absurdities head on, and as we've seen today, he's not afraid to shake things up. So if you're tired of the same old woke nonsense and want more bold takes, hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think in the comments. Does Ben have it right, or has he gone too far? The conversation is just getting started.